It's good to see all you guys here today. We are going to be jumping into, I'm trying to remember, what's the book we're doing? Oh, there you go. Thanks. Appreciate you guys knowing that. We're going to be in Ruth chapter 2. And before we get into this, there's a question that was on my mind as I read this chapter, and it's a question that I want to have in your mind as you read this chapter, and that is, how did you wind up there? How did you go to that place? How did you know which direction to go when you walked out of the house? How did you know how far to walk? How did you know whose field to go into? If you're sitting here going, Jason, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's okay, we haven't read the chapter yet. But I want to put that thought in your head because it's a thought that was in my head as I read through it, because I don't want you to miss it. The story of Ruth is awesome. If you didn't get a chance to, or you weren't here last week, you can go back on YouTube and watch Ruth chapter 1 and kind of walking through that. We unpacked a lot last week. It's a story within a story. It's a story about Ruth and Naomi and Boaz and all these people, but it's also a story about God and about us. It's about broken people and God's redeeming love for all of us. The way we're going to walk through this today is a little bit different in this series. We are going literally verse by verse as we go through the story of the book of Ruth. So it takes us a little bit of time to walk through it. We want you to grab a hold of a lot of things that we're going to be talking about. A lot of times in this series, we kind of go like, we want to teach on this topic. But in this, we're teaching on the story of Ruth. And there are lots of little nuggets that God has for you in the story. So get your handout, get your Bible out, get a pen out and make notes, circle, highlight, underline, all that kind of stuff as we dig in. Now, if you were not here last week, I need to set up the scene a little bit. The book of Ruth is the 8th book in Scripture. And if you are a movie watcher, this is a chick flick. It is an awesome chick flick. Like, I love this particular book, but I will tell you what it will not have. It will not have any lightsaber duels. It will not have any wizards. It will not have any explosions, car chases. It will not have any courtroom drama. It will not have any of that. It's a chick flick, so it will have a lot of dialogue. There's some talking going to go on, but it's awesome. The words are chosen beautifully and powerfully, and we want to learn a lot from it. It's an amazing story. So if you weren't here last week, let me catch you up in a few minutes. Here we go. I've been waiting all week to say this. Previously on Ruth. Here we go. So it's 1300 BC. There's a famine in a city called Bethlehem. Bethlehem stands for house of bread. It's supposed to be this amazing place that is always going to have plenty, but they have rejected and rebelled God, and so it is a place that has found itself in famine. There is a woman there and her family. She has a husband named Elimelech. Her name is Naomi. She takes her 2 boys and heads off to another city led by her husband. The city they go to is a city called Moab. Moab is not a great place. If you look back last week, we tell you the story of the city of Moab, but ultimately it's a place of people that are into pagan worship, satanic worship, and the women there are known for certain things. The women in Moab are known for seducing men of Israel who weren't able to stand up to temptation. They were weak-willed in and of themselves, and they cave into sexual relationships with these women, and it leads them into idolatry and paganism. It does not go well in the land. Her 2 sons marry 2 of these foreign girls. And then not long after that, dad dies. Not long after that, the sons die. And you get 10 years of a nightmare summed up in a couple of sentences in Ruth chapter 1. She decides to head back home to Bethlehem. But you understand that now all the men are gone. It's 3 widowed women. And in a patriarchal caste system that existed in their day and age, this is not a good situation. They have no name, no property. They can hold no standing. They have no way to provide food or anything for themselves. And so Naomi looks at her daughters-in-law and begs them not to go with her. She says, stay here. I can't offer you family. I can't offer you marriage. I can't offer you a future. I can offer you no children. If you go with me, hope is lost. So stay here. One of the 2 daughters, Orpah, stays there. But Ruth says, no, absolutely not. I'm going with you. And she gives this great speech in Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates me from you. She goes. Naomi heads back into Bethlehem, and they probably look at her. They look at her, and they go, you left here with a family, with a husband, with sons. You had hopes and dreams, and you returned literally calling yourself a bitter woman. The only thing you brought with you was a Moabite daughter-in-law. And that's how chapter 1 ends. I told you last week when we were looking at it, I was like, there's a danger of doing this slowly the way we're doing it, because Ruth was intended to be read in one sitting, that you could leave in chapter 1 a little depressed. But if you were here last week, we unpacked that a little bit. And even though it doesn't seem like it, at the end of chapter 1, there is a tiny thread of hope. A tiny thread of hope. And church, this is good news for us. There's a chapter 2. How many of you are grateful there's a chapter 2, right? Okay, so this thread of hope is about to expand. So here we go. We're diving in Ruth chapter 1 chapter 2 starting in verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side. He was a prominent man of noble character from Elimelech's family name. His name was Boaz. Say Boaz. Love it. Ruth the Moabitess asked Naomi, will you let me go into the fields and gather fallen grain behind someone with whom I find favor? And Naomi answered her, go ahead, my daughter. So Ruth left and entered the field to gather grain behind the harvesters. And she happened to be in the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from Elimelech's family. Man, we are just a few verses in, and all of a sudden, everything has already shifted. Like, the hero has come riding in on the white horse. I don't know why this is what went through my head, but when I was a kid, I loved the movie Armageddon. Anybody ever seen that movie? Okay, and you've got Harry Stamper, played by Bruce Willis, and he finally has that moment where he's like, no, I'm here, I'm going to save the world. Ben Affleck, get up in that rocket and take off and take care of my girl. And then he stays there, and everything blows up, and you get, I don't want to close my eyes, I don't want to. There you go. All 6 of you, thank you. All right, so I love it. Like, it's such a great, it's this moment. Now I need us to understand something as we glimpse into this. The book of Ruth is going to cover a total of about 13 years. Writing is very expensive in this century. To have paper, to have pen, to have ink. And so they're super selective about everything they write. They only elevate the most significant moments in the story. And so this is a super intentional moment of introducing Boaz. Well, who's Boaz? It says he's a man of noble character, a man of standing. He's not a man of sitting around. He's not a man of just watching TV all day doing nothing. He's a man of standing, a man of character. Other places in Scripture where this man of character is referenced are men of wealth, men of strength, or men of valor in war. The implication here is that he's all three. So I want you to get this. He is single, with a godly character, who owns his own house and property, and loves the Lord. If you're a single lady in here, they still exist. I just want you to hear that. Listen, you may be going, no, there's no hope for me. You don't have no idea what God has for chapter 2. And listen, you can be whole and be single. God's solution isn't always a marriage, but this is incredible that this is happening, and I'll get more into why in just a minute. See, in chapter 1, Naomi tells Ruth there's no hope, there's no family, there's no one to marry, there's no security, no provision, your life is over. We're 4 verses into chapter 2, and we're like, hey, you forgot Boaz. Boaz is going, no, I'm family. I can have security for you. I have a godly character. And this whole thing points to intentionality. See, what the author of the story is trying to guide us to is that there is a sovereign God at work behind every moment in this story. We don't want to miss that. That's who Boaz is. I want to talk to you a little bit about what is called gleaning. Your scripture might say gleaning. In the one I read, it says gathering grain behind the harvesters, which is the word for gleaning. All right, so if you want to know what gleaning is, in Leviticus 19:9 through 10 and Deuteronomy 24, the Bible sets up what gleaning is. Basically, God sets up his own social services system. He understands that needs are going to exist. And so he says, well, the land is mine, you're my people, your talents are mine, your skills are mine, your abilities are mine. So I want you to manage my land and your gifts my way. And he tells them exactly what that means. He says, I want you to be generous. I said, I want you to let them work. I want you to let them get food, but I want you to make it easy. And it's so countercultural to everything that we hear in our world today. In our culture, people going, get mine, leave nothing. It's all, I want to get all mine. And God says, I want you to bless others. By the way, that's why I love our church so much and the way that you support ministries. For those of you that don't know, a ton of what comes into this church goes out to bless other people. The reason that we have a house that we paid for now over 5 years in India with girls being rescued out of sex trafficking. The reason that we have partners in Germany and partners in Africa that are doing incredible things over there. The reason that we have partners in Spain that we're developing with and going to meet up with this summer. The reason that we can do the Big Give. The reason that we can do Serve Day, the reason that we can help families, the reason that there are about 6 families that you don't know about that you're helping to support going through professional counseling because of the needs in their life is because you consistently give, and when you give, we are able to give it away. And I just want to praise God for that. Can we just praise God together for that? We're not trying to be a church to build some sort of massive cathedral to Crossroads. We want to be about building the kingdom of God and reaching people and blessing people. That was set up by God all the way back at the beginning. It's not our idea. We're simply following God's instruction. And then I want you to see God guiding Ruth. Field workers were not great people. The men that were out there in the field working were usually from foreign places. They were not really good guys. They were criminals in many cases. It's dangerous for a woman. And you would think, like, of all the places, of all the fields, how did you wind up there? That's the question I led with. And I just want to tell you this. You can write this in your notes, and I think this is such a cool thing to think about. We see God a lot clearer in our rearview mirror than we do in the windshield. I mean, I think that's such an important thing for us to remember. I can't always explain what's happened in my life. I can't explain why I grew up in Baytown, Texas, and my mom and dad opened a business, and the economy tanked 11 months into that, and they lost everything, and it caused us to move from Baytown to Dallas, Texas. And in Dallas, Texas, my first day of high school there in Dallas, somebody said, hey, would you like to audition for a theatrical production? And I went, I play football. But it was my cousin, and she was my ride. So she was like, well, do this, or I'm going to take you home. And I was like, fine. So I went and auditioned, and I was like, man, I don't want to get any part. I ended up with a part. I went in with a part of a guy named Harold Hill, who was the lead in the musical called The Music Man. And I was the Music Man. I was playing football, didn't want to do theater. Next thing you know, I'm like, and dancing around the stage. But I learned so much about even how to speak and communicate, and I got over so many of my fears because I was in that place. And then God led us into ministry, and Crystal and I did not, when we first started dating, that was not our trajectory, and God changed, and we moved, and we've been to several states around the country. We had no idea when we went to Cincinnati that our son, Zachary, was going to be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and he had a horrible situation where he was honestly near death, and we happened to be in the, we happened to be in a city that had the number 2 rated pediatric endocrinology centers in all the country. We happen to be there. He got well. He's here today. If some of you are like going, we don't know you. I wonder how his son is. He's right there. He's fine. We had no idea when the phone rang and a person that talked to us about Crossroads Church, which was a church of about 60 people. We had no idea what coming here was going to look like. We had no idea. We had no vision of any of this. And when we got in here and we said, oh, let's celebrate after we get this building built, and everybody in our church puts their hands to the plow and works and literally put in carpet and lighting systems and ceiling tiles and sound systems and everything else. We had no idea that, but before we would get to our first year, COVID would hit. And we wouldn't celebrate our first anniversary even in this facility that we'd worked so hard for. We would celebrate it online. I went to bed one night and woke up as my worst nightmare, a televangelist. We had no idea how God was going to use any of those things. We had no idea what was going to happen when God called us into foster care. And I look back over the lives of 8 children, 4 different families, and I'm so grateful for what God's done. And every time I look back, you know what I see? I see God's hand all over it. But can we be honest? When we're in it, sometimes it can be hard to see. Because the truth is, we see God a lot clearer in our rearview mirror than we do in the windshield. Let's keep going, because that's us. That's Ruth. Verse 4. Later, when Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, he said to the harvesters, the Lord be with you, and the Lord bless you, they replied. I don't know why, but this reminded me when I was a kid, one of my favorite shows to watch with my parents was Cheers. And there's a character named Norm, and every time Norm, if you're over 30, you'll know. Thank you. Okay. There are kids right now in this Googling, who is Norm? And if you grew up with me, like your first thought right now is like, sometimes you wanna, and you just got that song playing in your head. And you've got all that going on. They welcome Norm. And it's kind of this moment. These guys that he works with are welcoming him in. And the author, because it's so expensive to write, they want to sum up the character and the life of Boaz in one sentence. And they do it in how he's greeted by his employees. How are you greeted on Monday morning? Seriously. Now, there are theologians that will go, well, this was a very colloquial way that they would greet people within the church setting. The only problem with that theological interpretation, they ain't at church. They're in a field with foreigners and outlaws that have come to understand who God is because of the man that runs the business. Like, that is an incredible greeting. Now, here's my question for you. What if the actions and attitudes that we portray at church leaked into your workplace? What if it leaked into your school? What if it leaked into your neighborhood? So here's the moment we've waited for in the story. You have Ruth who's out there gleaning. You have the hero riding in on his white horse. This is when Harry met Sally. This is, for those of you that are a little younger, this is when Noah met Allie in the Notebook. Those of you that are even younger, this is when Ron finally realized he was in love with Hermione. All right, this is all those moments. Verse 7. And Boaz asked his servant who was in charge of the harvesters, "Who is this young woman?" And the servant answers, "She is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the territory of Moab. And she asked, 'Will you let me gather fallen grain among the bundles behind the harvesters?' She came and has been on her feet since early in the morning, except that she rested a little while in the shelter." He says, "Who is this?" And they go, "Man, she showed up early. She asked to glean." We said, "Well, that's the law, so sure, go ahead and glean." And she has been, man, at it all day long. By the way, if you're wondering who she is, she's the Moabite Satan-worshiping girl that was committed to Naomi and showed up. She's the one everyone's talking about, tweeting about, and doing, chatting about on Snapchat. That's who this woman is. And Boaz is intrigued. And it says, then Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter," and I just want to pause right here because I love the way he says this. I want you to imagine being Ruth. You're out in the field. You're the Moabite. You know that you're the foreigner in your country. The guy that runs the place shows up, and everyone knows he is a God-honoring man, and he knows history. He knows you're a Moabite. He knows what the Moabites mean to the people of Israel. And he starts to walk towards you, and your heart starts pounding because you know you're about to get kicked off the field. And the first words out of his mouth, "My daughter." Not "get out of here." "We're family. I'll take care of you. You're okay." I love it. It says, then Boaz says to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, don't go and gather grain in another field. Don't leave this one. Stay close to my female servants. See which field they are harvesting and follow them. Haven't I ordered the young men not to touch you? When you are thirsty, go and drink from the jar the young men have filled." And right here in these verses, you get a glimpse of what it must have been like to be these young single women out in the middle of the field. It's a dangerous place. He has to tell the people, do not touch her. But with Boaz, you're safe, you're protected, you're in a relationship. And then he goes, hey, and we throw this verse away. But if you're thirsty, grab something to drink. That was not allowed. She is a foreigner who grew up worshiping pagan gods. But he's recognizing in something in her. She would not have been allowed to drink. She would not be allowed to drink from their vessels. She would not be allowed to drink from their well. But instead, he looks at her and he goes, "Hey, all my workers, we've got a Yeti over here that's filled with drinks. Go get you some water. You drink it right here." It's really a beautiful moment, and she's shocked. You ever watch a romantic comedy or a chick flick, and you get to certain points where people are being so romantic where you just go, "That's not realistic." And you look over and your spouse is crying and you're like, "You're buying this?" And then Crystal has to give me a napkin to wipe my eyes. Like that's what's happening right here. And here's her question. Because he's just given her value she should have never found in this moment. In verse 10, it says, she fell face down. She bowed to the ground and she said to him, "Why have I found favor with you? So that you notice me, although I'm a foreigner." Sometimes you recognize humility by what it is. Sometimes you recognize humility by what it's not. And in this moment, you can recognize by what is not. There's no sense of entitlement from her. There's no, "Well, about time you did something. I deserve this." She said, "Why?" Let me take your brain back to chapter 1 for a minute. In chapter 1, Naomi is asking, "Why are bad things happening to me?" Can I tell you, and this is not going to comfort you if you're going through a bad moment, but this is the truth. If you want to know why bad things happen to you in this life, it's because we live in a broken, sinful, and fallen world. If this life is temporary, we want to teach you how to be obedient to God in this life, but we want to teach it to you because that is going to lead you to the life to come. It's going to be later, but later lasts longer. And we want to attach your life. God wants to attach your life to something that is later, which means in a broken, sinful world, people act in broken, sinful ways. Death, decay, disease, hurt, pain, suffering are a part of this life, but they will not be a part of the life that is to come. And so why do bad things happen? Because we're sinful, broken. But she's asking, and it led her asking, expecting the day to be perfect is what led her to feeling regret and bitterness. See, when you wake up tomorrow, how many of you wake up and you go, "I hope today is a perfect day"? You're going to be wrong 100% of the time. Instead, you would wake up and go, "God, I'm heading into a broken day. Wow. God, use me to do what you want me to do in this brokenness." Man, he can answer that prayer, and it's powerful. See, in chapter 1, Naomi's asking, "Why are bad things happening?" In chapter 2, Ruth is asking, "Why are good things happening to me?" She knows she's in a broken, sinful state. She knows that this is, and so she's going, anything that happens good, she's not led to bitterness and regret. She's led to joy and to gratitude. Every day of your life, you're going to wake up and you're going to have the option to have the worst day of your life or the best day of your life. And you are going to be able to find enough evidence for both. So it's going to be about what you choose. It's going to be important that you choose well. And it leads to very different places. And I just want to, just on a side moment here, ladies, single ladies in here, if there's men, and this goes for guys too, but if there are men trying to get your attention, ask why. The motivation of love and lust looks very different. I love how Boaz responds to the question of why. In verse 11, Boaz says to her, everything you've done for your mother-in-law since your husband's death has been fully reported to me. How you left your father and mother in your native land, and how you came to a people that you did not previously know. And then he says a prayer over her in verse 12. May the Lord reward you for what you have done, and may you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wing you have come for refuge. She says, why? And he said, because I watched you. Because of your character, your work ethic, your compassion, your commitment on the road. And he's basically looking at her and going, you know, in verse 16, when you said, my God, or your God will be my God, well, that God was watching. And he sees what you've done. And he is being faithful to you. It's an incredible, incredible moment. And I'm going to tell you right here, because so many people might think this, but this is not happening because Ruth looks cute. She's not having a great hair day. This is not appearance-based. She is filthy from gleaning in a field all day. She's a beggar who has nothing to her name. And she's probably worn the same dress over and over and over. When the Bible actually wants us to understand that physical attraction is what led to a relationship, the Bible actually is honest with us and tells us. It tells us with Abraham and Sarah, with Rachel and Jacob. It says with several other people. But that's not what drew Boaz to Ruth. You know what drew Boaz to Ruth? He tells you. He noticed her character, her commitment. I talked to the single ladies a minute ago. Let me ask you single men. What's your criteria that you're looking for? What are you searching for in your life? Attraction can be faked. If you don't believe me, watch all reality television shows. And by the way, if you anchor your life to attraction, as much as, listen, you're all beautiful as children of God, but can we be honest? It fades over time. Stuff doesn't work the way it used to work. It just changes. Anchor your life, anchor it to something much more significant. Look for someone who matches the calling that God has in you. The first thing you want to do if you're a single person, align your first loves. And it better be Jesus. Align your first loves and then look for the person that has the character that you would love, the character of Christ living in them. Look for someone who matches the calling that God has on you. Man, Boaz is looking at her going, girl, you got dirt on your face, but your character screams beautiful. It's not romantic yet, though, I don't think. And then here's what happens. Ruth says in verse 13, my Lord, she said, I found favor with you, for you have comforted and encouraged your servant, although I am not like any of your female servants. In other words, she's going, I don't even deserve this value. He values her character. He values her publicly in front of everybody. He gives her value that was destroyed in chapter 1. She never expected this. She didn't expect to be protected and cared for. She didn't expect somebody to go, she's off limits to all other men. And now is when I think the romance starts in verse 14. It says at mealtime, Boaz told her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in the vinegar sauce. So she sat beside the harvesters and he offered her roasted grain. And she ate and was satisfied and had some leftover. Come on, guys. Get some bread and roasted grain, man. I mean, here's what I want you to take from this. This is so cool. He wants more conversation with her. And so that brings a romantic meal of roasted grain. I remember dating Crystal, and we were in high school, and we were broke. We were broke for quite a long time, and she did this thing on that day that she still does to this day, and it was amazing to me. You ever have the moment where you're so broke and you're dating somebody, you want to pay for their meal, so you have to order down from your normal order? Like you still need to basically order one meal because you can only afford one meal, but you need it to come in the form of two meals so you can share. So you order so much smaller stuff. And you're like, okay, so I can handle this. And I remember ordering very little, and she ordered very little. And Crystal to this day doesn't eat a lot of food. Like, I can call her, like, what'd you have for lunch? She's like, I had a cracker and 2 grapes. I'm like, that's not food. Like that, like you need something else. Like this, I don't know how you're sustaining yourself. And so she was eating and I was eating, and I ate my food in like 15 seconds. And I'm staring, we're having conversation, it's going great. I'm thinking about her, and I'm so amazed that we're going to go to a movie afterwards. I got to save money for that, so I can't buy anything else. And she's not eating all of her food. And there's this thought that's going through my head as we're talking. It's like, can I eat her food? I mean, I paid for it. I mean, like, can I just reach over? And then she did something she still does to this day. She sees me having a conversation and my empty plate, and she took her plate and put it over in front of me. And at that moment, I said, will you marry me? That's beautiful. Like, it's a powerful, unbelievable moment. I knew we were it was shocking. I knew we were destined to be together. What's happening with Ruth and Boaz is shocking. The Lord of the harvest is having a meal with an outcast. He says, dip the bread. Some of you are like, wow, that's not that big of a deal. Have you ever been to Maggiano's? Son, let me tell you something. Let me tell you, if you got a large family, because with all of our kids and everything, sometimes it's 7 of us going to meal. If you go to dinner today for 7 people, it costs like $1,000. And so let me tell you some secrets. One, when you go to Maggiano's, order water. Second, the kids' meals, very large. You can split them. And they won't say no. And load up on the bread because that part's free. And they're going to bring this dip. It's just oil and vinegar, man. And I was like, when they first put it, I was like, that looks gross. It's good. It's real good. Dip it, sop it up. Like, it's so good. And that's what's happening in this moment. It's this beautiful moment. And I love what it says. She gets full as she's eating with the Lord of the harvest. Can I tell you that wasn't quick? She's starving. She's been hungry for days. And she eats her fill, an outcast at his table. Verse 16. When she got up to gather grain, Boaz ordered his young men. He said, let her even gather grain from among the bundles. Don't humiliate her. Pull out some stalks from the bundles for her and leave them for her to gather. Don't rebuke her. I'm going to say this, and I know this can be something that some people think is politically incorrect, but I think it's an important statement. Men in this room, whether you're single, married, old, young, does not matter. Men, you are wired by God to protect. That does not mean that women do not have a protective gene. I'm not saying that, but the men in this room, we need to understand God has wired you to protect, specifically to protect the women that are in our life that we love, spouses, friends, others, family member. Boaz uses his position and his strength for protection. He even says if she doesn't know our customs and she starts pulling stuff out of the bundles, let her have it. He's generous, but not because she's a charity case, but because he's honoring her. I mean, ladies, imagine if the men in your life that love you the most, if you could literally say about each of them, I am better because that man is in my life. I am closer to God because he helps that happen. We need those types of relationships. Ruth is bringing her faithfulness. Boaz is bringing his faithfulness. You see it from him, not just in how he treats her, but how he talks about her when she's not there. Men, the words that come out of your mouth about the women in your life when they are not there should still be words of absolute honor and affection. Damn, there we go. Thank you. I love that. There we go. Boaz looks at his boys and goes, hey, I know it's dangerous in the field for a single woman. Hands off her. Can I tell you, this is why pornography is such a devastating thing in our culture. Because what pornography seeks to do is to take women, and also men, but specifically the market for women in pornography is so huge, it reduces women from people, from humans, from children of God to collections of body parts. And Boaz goes, and listen, this ought to be the statement of every man in this room. Boaz goes, nuh-uh, not on my watch. That girl will be protected. She will be loved, she will be valued, and she will be honored. You are not to touch her, to gawk at her. We are going to honor her. And that ought to be the heart that we have as well. Verse 17. So Ruth gathered grain in the field until evening. She beat out what she had gathered and was about 26 quarts of barley. I just got to have a side note here. That's 30 to 50 pounds of barley. The average ration for a worker in this day was about 2 pounds a day. She just made 2 weeks worth of money in a day. It's also how we know that Ruth did CrossFit. Because the next verse says she picked up the grain and went into town. If she's toting 30 to 50 pounds of barley after a hard day in the field, sister is swole. Let me tell you, that's important to know, okay? Says that she picked up the grain and went into town where her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought out what she had left over from a meal and gave it to her. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you gather barley today? And where did you work? And may the Lord bless the man who noticed you." And Ruth told her mother-in-law, whom she had seen, who she had worked with, and said, "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May the Lord bless him, because he has not abandoned his kindness to the living or the dead." Naomi continued, "This man is a close relative. He is one of our family redeemers." Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also told me to stay with the young men until I have finished all of my harvest." So Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, my daughter, it is good for you to work with his female servants so that nothing will happen to you in another field." And Ruth stayed close to Boaz's female servants and gathered grain until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Naomi is giddy, which is strange if you remember how we left off in chapter 1. In chapter 1, here's what they thought. There is no food, no family. At the end of chapter 2, there's abundant food, and she's counted as family. In chapter 1, she says, "The Lord's hand has afflicted me, the Lord is against me." In chapter 2, she says, "Lord, bless him." Like it's almost not even the same bitter woman. It's so radically different because she had found a family redeemer. We're going to talk a lot more about this in upcoming weeks, but here's what I want you to get just for today to get our mind going on what this means. To redeem a family member in this day and culture meant three things. One, it meant that you had to have the right to do it. We're going to learn a lot about this in chapter 4, but there's a family lineage that you had to follow, and there's a certain order that people were there to step in and take over the marriage and the land and all that stuff. You had to have the right. The second, you had to have the resources. Redemption was a purchase. You had to provide for them. You had to provide for them in that moment with a home and a place to live and food to eat and all that stuff, but you also had the willingness to make them your family, which is bigger than we think. It's not just an emotional attachment. You're not just taking her in. You're saying, we'll take her in. Any offspring she has and their kids, we will share, we will divide, we will make all of this work for them. It is not easy. If you've ever adopted or fostered children, you know this is not easy. Bringing somebody into your family that was not birthed into your family is incredibly difficult. It's hard enough to raise the ones that were born into your family. But if you foster or adopt and you've been through that, you know that there's home studies. The FBI has to have your fingerprints. There's paperwork. And when I say paperwork, I mean small mountains of paperwork. Like it is a challenge to be able to do. If you've done it, you know it's not easy. Do you know what it's required even today to make somebody a part of your family? It's perseverance. You got to be willing to put in the work. Next week, we're going to talk a lot more about that. But as I wrap up chapter 2 today, what I want to do is I just want to hit you with a couple of observations. And the first one is this. God has answers that you don't know about yet. These women thought there was no way out. Many of you have been in a place where you go, there's no way out. God can't use me. I'm too broken, too sinful. I'm too much. I'm too this. I'm too that. Whatever it is. And I just want you to know, with God, all things are possible. If you would put your faith in Him and your obedience and surrender to Him, there is nothing. Listen, you cannot out-sin the grace of our God. The second thing I want you to understand is this, is that faithfulness is noticed and rewarded. Ruth is faithful. The God she surrendered to in chapter 1 saw and paid attention to her, and her faithfulness will be rewarded. And listen, it may not be in this lifetime, but it will be noticed and it will be rewarded. We are living for later, and church, later lasts what? Longer. I want you to see this just in a microcosm of this. In chapter 1, Elimelech took his family. He was with the people of God, staying in the house of bread that God had provided. And when it wasn't going the right way, he said, I'm going to abandon the people of God, and I'm going to go over to the people of Moab, the place he was not supposed to be. By the way, that did not go well. In chapter 2, they return. Here's what I want you to see. When they returned to Bethlehem, the family left Bethlehem because it was in famine and destitute, and they thought they would all die. When they come back to Bethlehem, Bethlehem's doing great. Do you notice that? Bethlehem's no longer in famine. Bethlehem has food to spare. God rewards obedience. That is so important that we understand that. The third thing I want you to write down, it's easier to steer a moving car than a parked car. I couldn't come up with a better way to say that. JD and I were talking about this week, and he said he had a mentor that said it this way, and I love the way it was said. When you don't know what to do, have a bias towards action. Do something. Take a step. When Ruth and Naomi are starving, they didn't just sit in a little house or shack and go, oh, we're starving, I wonder what we'll do. No, she got up and walked out of the house. She moved. And I would look at her and go, how did you know what field? How did you know where you're going? And she's going, man, I just started walking. And guess what? When I started moving, God was ahead of me. I moved, God steered. That's where I ended up. And I think we need to hear that. And some of us may need to get up and move. Maybe God's asking you to move into something in your life, something in your family, in some conversation. It's something in your work. Maybe God's asking you repeatedly to go on mission this year or this summer when we go on one of our mission trips. Whatever it is, move. And the fourth thing I want you to hear is that how we work says more about our Christian life than the service you attend. I love that we gather together in here on Sunday. I love hearing our church sing. I love all the things we get to teach. It is fantastic. I love the attitude of selflessness and service that you guys bring to every service. I love the spirit of celebration you have about what God is doing in your life. Here's my question. Where's that on Tuesday afternoon? Is it there? Where is that spirit when you are dealing with your most frustrating client? Where is that when that kid that is in your class that drives you insane is doing it again? Where is that when the boss that frustrates you to no end walks into your office to complain again? I love that the story of Ruth doesn't happen in the church. It happens in a field. I think if you were to ask Ruth and Boaz, like, how did you meet? The truth is, one simply walked into a field and worked, and the other one showed up to work. That was it. And you would not believe what God did with that. It's not a coincidence. It's the providence, it's the sovereignty of God at work in every part of the story. And I want to say this to you, and I don't think this is in your notes, but it's important if you just get this in our head. Often your obedience is the only thing that separates you from God's plan for your life and who He wants you to be. Your obedience is the only thing that separates you from God's plan for your life and who He wants you to be. So come in here, sing, grow, drink coffee, and go into your neighborhood. Go to your work, go to your classroom, go into your home. They're waiting for you. That is where a huge impact for Christianity will be. It's why we're here. It's why we end every one of our services the same way. Crossroads, you are not dismissed. You are sent. We mean it. It's not just something cute to end our service with. It's more. The last thing I want to share with you is something we're going to tease for future weeks. The Bible is not primarily a book about self-discovery. The Bible is primarily a book about God discovery. And we learn a lot about God in this moment. I want to tease the next 2 weeks with this. God is our Redeemer. He brings the outcast in as His family. He has the right to redeem. He has the resources to purchase you. He has the willingness to do everything it takes to make you a part of His family. He will serve you at His table. He will show grace to the outcast. He will shock you with His love. You don't need to run to any other field to find security and hope, because He and He alone is our Redeemer. We have special services coming up in a couple of weeks. Maybe you've heard of them. They're called Easter. And oftentimes, and I'm not knocking this, but in our culture, it can turn into outfits and candy purchases. But what we want you to focus on, yeah, get your candy. I love candy too. Get the candy, okay? But don't make it about the candy. That day, we will celebrate our Redeemer. And we don't want you to miss that for a second. This is a simple love story. God used a Moabite woman in a helpless family, and it did not stop there. There is so much more. Guys, we are just now getting to the good part. And I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. It's so awesome. Because we're Ruth wandering in the field. We are the desperate sinner with nothing to draw the Lord of the harvest over to us. And yet God saw, God pursued. He set his sight on your soul. See, it turns out that that tiny thread of hope that Naomi was grabbing a hold of at the end of chapter 1, well, it wasn't as tiny as she thought. It was anchored to the rock of our salvation in the person of our God. It was going to go great. She just didn't know it yet. Thank God for chapter 2. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for today. And God, I know as we walk through this story, there's so much in there for us to unpack and uncover. And God, I'm grateful for a church that's patient to walk verse by verse through this incredible story. And God, that right now, even now, we can be reminded that we're not simply looking back at history and going, oh, that's what God used to do. That's how God used to redeem. That's how God used to move. That's how God used to perform miracles. That God, we don't look back and say, that's the God that used to. That we understand that that's the same God who still does. That you still move, that you still work. That God, you are still doing miracles. You are still redeeming people. You are still changing lives. There are people in this room that are Ruth, and God, we get to see the redemption of their story. There are people in this room that are Naomi and bitter and cut off from the joy in their life. And God, we know that you can redeem that. God, we know over and over that there is a reality that you are not done, that you are still working, still moving, still changing our lives. And God, for anybody that was here last week and filled with a sense of desperation and really connected to the story from a place of despair, God, I pray today that they would have hope erupt in their life. That they would start to see that the same God who moved then is the same God who moves now. The same God we prayed to then is the same God we pray to now. The same God who healed then is the same God that healed now. And the same God that saved then is the same God that saves now. We love you. We thank you and we trust you in Jesus' name.